Cardinals Nation is abuzz on social media again this week with a topic that we've heard before, but could it finally be coming to fruition? Yadier Molina, will he be joining the Cardinals coaching staff in 2026? We'll talk about the new report coming up on b-schaeff Daily. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is Thursday, October 9th, 2025. Cubs are still alive in the National League Division Series as of this recording. We'll see if the Brewers can knock them out on Thursday night. If you're a Cardinals fan, what are you rooting for in that series? I assume you're rooting against the Cubs, but Brewers are pesky division rival as well, so let your thoughts be known in the comments section below. But today we want to talk about a new report surfacing out of Puerto Rican publication that has Yadier Molina potentially on the move. Could he join the Cardinals coaching staff for 2026? That's the report out of El Vocero. I know I'm saying it wrong, but I listened to a pronunciation guide, and I'm really trying. El Vocero. Apparently there's a different pronunciation in Spain versus Latin America. But anyway, that's the publication, and I'll be totally straight up with you. Don't have my wife sitting in the room. She'd be able to help out because she took many, many years of Spanish. I did not. I took French. But I'm going to trust Google Translate to mostly give us the information here. The newspaper, by the way, translates to the spokesman, for those who may be wondering. But that's the report, elvotero.com. Yadier Molina revealed he is in talks with the St. Louis Cardinals to join Oli Marmol's coaching staff next Major League season. And the word from Yadi, they kind of post it as though it's a direct quote from him, at least in the way that it's presented on the website. But, of course, he was speaking in Spanish. But the way that they break it down, we're currently in contact with St. Louis to coach the Cardinals to help Marmol. He's still managing, but I'll be there by his side. I would be there by his side. Nothing's concrete yet, but we're working on it. According to elvotero.com, that's from former Cardinal catcher Yadier Molina. Now, of course, we have seen Yadier Molina not that long ago. He made a couple of guest appearances on the Cardinals bench this past season. One of them happened in September, and that was a little bit curious, right, for Cardinals fans, I think, because you can go back further, and I guess this was at the start of the 2024 season was when Yadi was supposed to rejoin, because 22 was his final year. 23 was a rough one. 24, I want to say, was when the reports came out that he was in talks to join the organization in some capacity, more of an official capacity for that season. But it was said it wasn't going to be in a coaching role, not in an on-field role. He was named a special assistant to Mozeliak on December 6th, 2023. But that never really happened. And, I still think there's some confusion about that because Cardinals fans say, well, he's on the payroll. Yeah, I don't know that he ever was. He was never listed on the directory by the team. It was announced that he would be, but then I don't think they dotted the I's and crossed the T's for that, and so it never really happened. There was no assisting happening from Yadi to Mo, as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong about that, but I've circled back on it a few times, and I never saw anything official. It was sort of one of those things that I think a lot of Cardinals fans assumed was happening because it was said by Mozeliak that it was going to happen. I remember it being at winter warm-up that January in 2024, that it was John Mozeliak talking about it on the stage and saying, kind of from December 6th when the Cardinals, I guess they did announce it. There's a tweet from December 6th. Yadier Molina has been named special assistant to president of baseball operations, but he never showed up, never really performed any duties that year. In January of 24, so a month, 40 days later, I recall Mozeliak on that stage being asked, what's the status? And he said, we don't exactly know what he will be doing, but I can tell you he is back. Yadi is back. That Mozeliak said that. And so, I could forgive Cardinals fans if they thought that Yadi was back because Mo said he was on a stage with a microphone. But then it never really materialized. And of course, I believe the Molinas, they moved to Austin at some point in time, Austin, Texas. His son, whose name I believe is Yanuel, big-time catching prospect in the high school ranks that's, moving toward potentially deciding collegiate baseball route. Will he be drafted? I think upcoming would be his senior season, but that would happen in the spring, right? So I'm not 100% sure on the timeline there for Yadi's son, who's a good catcher. They moved to Austin to play baseball. That's a great area to be if you're trying to make it in sports, high school competition there, certainly in football, but I believe the same is true in baseball. Lake Travis is the high school that Yadier Molina is attending. And I believe I'm seeing on his social media now he is committed to UT Arlington for the class of 2026. So I guess that does mean this spring he'll play his final season of high school baseball, if I'm not mistaken on that. But that kind of was the reason, I think, that Yadi wasn't really ready to do anything official, even though he kind of said, special assistant. And those special assistant roles are very, very loose in terms of the commitment. And, I guess it's possible he was serving in some capacity. I don't know that he was ultimately employed, but I don't really think it matters. The degree to which they thought he would be involved and then the degree to which he was involved, which is ultimately nil, where there was a gap, obviously, there. Didn't seem to be any hard feelings from anybody because everybody understood, Yadi wants to spend time with his family. His son is playing high school baseball, and that's something that Yadi wants to be involved in, wants to be able to see. Nobody would fault him for that. It was weird the way that it all came together, but again, I don't think there was any hard feelings, any issues from the side of the organization. And I don't think there were any issues from Yadi because Yadi, kind of similar to how Matt Holliday was going to be the bench coach, and then he was like, wait a minute, that sounds like a big commitment. I think Yadi said, sure, I'll kind of do some stuff, but then push came to shove, and ultimately it didn't really happen. But there didn't really need to be an official announcement of Yadier Molina has been let go from his role as special assistant. That's not the vibe of that role anyway. It's very low key type of role. Anybody else, they have other special assistants. Like Joe McEwing, remember he was hired as the bench coach last minute after Holliday didn't want to do it. And then they were like, okay, that was kind of we were under duress hiring you for that role. We don't really want to keep you in that role, but he can be a special assistant. You can have it's like the title. The degree to which he's actually doing a ton or doing very little is not known publicly. I guess maybe it's been reported by somebody somewhere, but it's not like a major point of contention, right? The same would have been true for Yadi's role, but his name's Yadi, and he's very, very well known, and people want to know what he's up to. And so that's why it kind of took on more of a life of its own when he didn't ultimately fill in the special assistant role the way that people thought he might, right? People thought, well, he could be there at spring training. That would be really helpful to the young catchers. And then that didn't really happen. And so after that point, it was like, well, what is the point? If he's not going to be in the dugout, what is it that he would be doing? And so it kind of fell by the wayside for 2024. 2025, he's guest coaching for a couple of series at home. I believe the first time he was due to be in town for an autograph signing for something on a personal business sort of endeavor, and said, hey, I'd like to be there. And Oli jumped at the opportunity because, as we've talked about on the show, Oli is not threatened. He doesn't feel that's not the vibe for Oli when it comes to Yadier Molina. The vibe for Oli when it comes to Yadier Molina on the surface anyway seems to be, please be here as much as you want to and impart wisdom and be around because 2022 you were on that team that made the playoffs that I managed, and Oli Marmol knows as good as anyone what the impact of Yadier Molina in the Cardinal clubhouse was, and can be. So I don't think it should be a surprise to anybody that Oli jumped at the chance. And then he wanted to do it again in September, and it happened again. I believe that was Giants series, if I'm recalling correctly. So happened twice, and now we're getting the reports again that are bubbling up, kind of like it happened 2 years ago at the end of 2023, where it's like, hey, Yadi might want to join up in some capacity. Does it feel more real this time? I think it kind of does because you've had that proof of concept that, okay, 2 times he was willing to come to St. Louis, be boots on the ground, and be present. Now, is this going to manifest into a full-time role? I would say still I'm skeptical of that. But if Yadi says I'm going to be by his side, I mean, shoot. If that materializes, I think it would be a great thing for the Cardinals. I don't think anybody sitting here thinks it wouldn't be a good thing for the Cardinals to have Yadi around in that capacity. But it's also kind of a little bit awkward, right? Because, multiple reasons. Oli Marmol's the manager. His contract goes through 2026. Chaim Bloom told reporters last week that there's not really been any extension talks yet with Oli Marmol, and that nobody really feels a certain way about that. It's just, haven't gotten to it. But then you do kind of start to wonder, okay, eventually there is the conversation or there isn't, and that kind of tells you how, things might proceed. I have been pretty outspoken that I think Oli Marmol is the long-term manager of the Cardinals and can be the guy to manage this team the next time that they're winning, the next time that the front office and the ownership group is focused on winning. I know a lot of Cardinals fans feel differently. That's okay. I just share my opinion, and you guys can have yours. But I think Oli is sharp. I think he's the right guy for the job. All right, so why is it awkward? Well, Yadi obviously wants to manage in the big leagues at some point. He is seeing that Albert's probably going to be named the Angels manager. And it's like, okay, Albert's ready. You kind of, I don't know if there's any like friendly competition there, but it's like, I better get on the stick and make sure I'm getting, lining up my opportunity. Could Yadi's opportunity come in St. Louis? I don't know. Like I said, I think the Cardinals have their manager. I feel like Oli Marmol and Chaim Bloom will get on pretty well. We'll have similar philosophies, but Chaim Bloom didn't choose him. But the thing about this is interesting. Like, Chaim Bloom didn't choose Oli Marmol. Chaim Bloom has no reason to choose Yadier Molina, especially without really interacting with or knowing the guy. So that's what, timing-wise, is tricky about this. If you're Yadi, and it was still John Mozeliak in charge, whether they loved each other or not, I don't really know. There's some friction there maybe, but they obviously knew each other very well and had reasons to respect one another. If you're Yadi and you want to manage the St. Louis Cardinals someday, there's a new guy in charge that you don't know and doesn't know you. And so, yeah, he obviously is aware of what you did for the organization while you were a player. But if you're wanting to get your name in the running for any potential vacancy that should open up, getting your nose in there a little bit, building that relationship couldn't hurt, right? But at the same time, could it simply just be, Yadi wants to be closer to the game? Maybe the Cardinals are the organization that can allow him to kind of have a foot in, still maybe a foot out into some of the other endeavors that he does. And maybe could it look like a part-time coaching role where he's in the dugout? Maybe he doesn't travel, right? Maybe he's in St. Louis for home, and then he goes back home to Austin to be with his family for road series. Or maybe it's a combination of those types of ideas. Is that a thing the Cardinals would be open to? I think Oli Marmol would be open to it. And so could you get away with that with any other organization in baseball? Maybe not. But if you're just trying to get your feet in and be around the game again, build some of those relationships again, be on the radar for teams, maybe not just the Cardinals if you want to be a future manager, the timing could make sense for that, for Yadier Molina. And the benefit to the Cardinals is obviously, I think, having him around makes you better. So there's a lot of things going on with this that depending on the type of role that we see, if it comes to fruition. Again, right now, this is just the report out of the Puerto Rican newspaper that had the scoop. There's not really any more smoke to it than that, but Cardinals fans are certainly talking about it on Twitter, and obviously they're making the connection to say, well, if there's only 1 year on the contract for Oli, bada bing, bada boom. But again, I don't think Oli Marmol is viewing it that way or cares. I really think he's comfortable in his role to say, like, look, if this makes us better, this is what we're going to do. Could that be a way of falling on the sword a little bit? Because if you're inviting Yadi into the situation, the dots are not hard to connect thereafter, right? But also, it's already kind of the elephant in the room. And so if you're Oli Marmol and you're like, no, I'm going to push back on this, Yadi's reaching out wanting to be part of what we're doing here, and I'm going to be the one to say no, well, how does that look? It's like you've already lost at that point, if that's how you're doing things. And so I don't think Oli Marmol operates that way. I think Oli Marmol has Yadier Molina in the fold. I think if he wins with him as a coach on his staff, then, more power to Oli Marmol, right? More power to his potential efficacy in the job and his long-term standing as the Cardinal manager. So I think that's why it works. Again, I think if there was this awkward tension that people will inevitably place into this situation, you wouldn't have Oli Marmol falling over at the opportunity to have Yadier Molina in his dugout a couple of times this past season. So I think it works. I hope it happens, honestly, because I think it would help the Cardinals. I think as you're talking about rebuilding, whether you're saying the word or not, you're talking about putting your team in a position to find a foundation in 2026, 2027. Kind of forget that next year we got to talk about 2026 now. you're finding your footing as an organization under this kind of new era. And who better to help guide than the person that guided the organization through the last era, honestly. And once he left, it all kind of fell apart. Now, it wasn't just the Yadi factor, but again, if you talk to people who were around and who experienced that, those 20 years really of Yadi, maybe not quite 20 years, but the length of time that it was, he's given a lot of credit for what happened, for what happened for pitchers, for just like the tenor of the club, the clubhouse, led by example, certainly, for the longest of times. You might say, well, toward the end, he was kind of watching his basketball team while he was a player. Yeah, whatever. Like, I don't think that's really a reflection of what the Cardinals would be getting from Yadi in a coaching role if he is ready to commit the time. And if they can agree, hey, here's what the expectations are. Here's what we would love for, to see from you. Can you provide this? We'll understand that you've got other things going on. We'll come up with a part-time role. More like an expansion of the guest coaching that he just did a couple of times. Expand that, but it doesn't have to entail 162 games and everything. Is that something that can work for everybody? If so, I think it can be something that works for the Cardinals and for the betterment of the team to have Yadi around. What's your take on this? Do you think if it happens, it automatically means he's the next manager of the Cardinals? Because I don't necessarily think that, but I can't deny that, the optics of how that would look if he's suddenly around and his aspirations to manage are known. And if they don't give an extension to Oli before opening day, which I am still on record as saying I think they probably will. I think it could happen in spring training just like it did 2 years ago. But again, it's a new Pobo who has grown in a relationship with the manager, Oli Marmol, but they didn't choose each other. So there's always, until we see that next step of like commitment in adding to the length of his contract, then, we're just left to kind of sit and go, all right, well, we'll keep an eye on that. And adding Yadier Molina back into the situation when the Cardinals are, again, I mean, you think about timeline-wise, it does certainly line up. I can't ignore that. That if Yadi's got a son that's about to graduate high school and he's going to be playing in college and, that, not to say that Yadi wouldn't want to be around to watch him play his college baseball, but watch him through the end of college. Okay, I'm kind of a part-time coach. I'm not taking on the rigors of what a manager has to do. And then maybe another year or two later, the Cardinals are kind of coming out of the rebuild. They've got the foundation down. Time to find a manager, that's going to line up with the ascension of the organization. If they don't extend Oli, the timing could line up for Yadi from a personal perspective to be more available and ready for that increase in role, because you're the manager of the team. It consumes you. That's all you've got time for. And that's certainly not where Yadi's been the last couple of years in the way that it's been described. And so is that about to change if he's got a son graduating from high school? It's interesting to wonder about that. And I'm not really, I don't think I'm injecting anything into this, any speculation into this that's not already being talked about. It's the elephant in the room. But I'll take the Cardinals at face value when they say, Oli Marmol at face value when he says, I want Yadier Molina on my staff as a coach because I think it helps us win. I think it helps us get better. And then you leave all the speculative stuff and all the extra stuff until it's one of those, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it types of things, in my opinion. I think that's how it would be treated, and I think that's appropriate for Oli, for the Cardinals to treat it that way. Take it all as it comes. But no, do you think having Yadier Molina in the dugout in 2026, even as they're sort of retooling, rebuilding, transitioning still to what the future is going to look like, could that win you more baseball games in 2026? Not talking about down the road, immediately. If Yadi is around, I think yes. I think his presence helps. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and we'll continue talking about this on B-Schaeff Daily if any more comes of it. Keep you updated on what, if any, the role ends up being for Yadi and what we think about it once we know more. But so far, it's a report out of Puerto Rico. And a lot of times when it comes to Latin American players from this part of the world, there are folks down there that are plugged in, and they'll get this kind of information first. So we'll see if that ends up being the situation with this, or if it's kind of more like, well, they happened to ask Yadi about it, and he said, yeah, we talk about it, kind of like he said a couple of years ago, and then it never really materialize. But could it feel different this time? Because we did see Yadi boots on the ground a couple of times at Busch this past season, even after the Cardinals were out of it, too. That feels notable, right? It's not like the Cardinals were in a playoff push when Yadi was there the second time. Kind of knew the deal at that point, that it was more of a lost season. So I think it's an interesting topic, and I wanted to jump on here for 20 minutes and break it down with y'all. Appreciate you guys for jumping back in, listening, and as things happen this offseason, we will be all over it here on B-Schaeff Daily. I've got another video coming Friday, so you'll get back-to-back days here at least, where my plan is to get something recorded on the topic of the Cardinals potentially willing to trade from their catching depth. That's what Derek Gould has reported. I saw that MLB Trade Rumors picked it up, and they're talking about that. They put Ivan Herrera as the main photo, the picture on that headline, and so people are trying to connect those dots. I'll tell you what I think of it. I think whether I'm right or wrong, my read on the situation is one that I'm confident in, and so that doesn't mean it's accurate, but it does mean that I'll break it down how I see the way the Cardinals could explore trading a catcher this offseason or multiple catchers and what I expect to happen with that. We'll talk about that on Friday's B-Schaeff Daily. So make sure you're subscribed and have the bell turned on for notifications on YouTube. You're following on Spotify to be able to listen at your leisure to our Cardinals podcast this offseason. That'll do it, though, for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we will talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.